Thank you. It's really an honor and a privilege to be with you here today. We are truly the remnant. We are truly the small minority of people, whether Christians or non-Christians, who are seeking to understand the time and take a stand for righteousness and against the evils of our day. It can get a bit discouraging sometimes when we see the great majority of people and the great majority of even our Christian friends who are asleep, who don't understand what is happening. But I think there is a great awakening coming, and it's coming a lot sooner than people think. So today I'm here to talk to you primarily about the financial crisis which is coming. I think it's going to be very, very large indeed. And so I'm going to talk to you a little bit about that. You can't separate it from the political crisis that we're in. So we're going to start out. I call it the end of the party. America's socialized economy is rolling over. And I think the next few months are going to be very revealing to a lot of people about a lot of things. I'd like to start out with what I call the perspective triangle. This triangle basically describes the decline of the United States. And I call it a threefold decline. The left side of the triangle is the monetary economic decline of the United States, which is going to be the major topic that I've been asked to speak on this morning. This is because we've run up the greatest debt pyramid in the history of the United States. Everybody, the government, corporations, businesses, individuals have gone into massive debt. That debt pyramid is collapsing, and they're trying to keep it alive by running the printing presses. And so we're entering a period of recession. We are in it, and it's about to go a lot deeper, we think, and indeed may turn into a depression. So today we'll talk about the monetary economic decline of the United States, but it's pretty hard to understand unless you understand the right side of the triangle, which is the political decline of the United States. And this is based on the fact that we are plunging into socialism. We have become a socialist nation. It didn't just start with President Obama. It started, back in the Depression in the 40s and 50s and so forth. And basically every single platform in Norman Thomas's, or Planck and Norman Thomas's Socialist Party platform has long since been implemented and put into effect in the United States. We are a socialist nation, and socialism is a small jump from communism. And so we're plunging to the political left very, very rapidly. And there's powerful people pulling the strings behind both political parties, the Republicans and Democrats, and there's not a lot of difference between the two. As George Wallace said many years ago, not a dime's worth of difference between the two parties. There's powerful people pulling the strings behind them, pulling the strings behind Obama, who are marching us towards a world government, towards a global government. Some people think that global government is the rising kingdom of the Antichrist, and there's certainly some arguments in favor of that. But whatever it is, it's moving very, very rapidly. And I believe that the election in November may be the most critical election in the history of the United States, because the steamroller that has come into power as the political left took over the government of the United States in 2008 completely. If it's not slowed down this November, I have great fear for the future of our country and for our future freedom. A lot of people ask me, how did we get into this position? And I saw a video. In fact, I saw it last night. It's a brand new video, and I highly recommend it. It's called The Agenda, and it's really about how the political left took over America. It's on the table outside. It's brand new. And if you want to understand how we got from where we were as a free country 50, 60, 70 years ago, whatever, to where we are today, please get this, view this video, and share it with some friends, family members, et cetera, et cetera. So we're in a social political decline. It's accelerating, and that really is why we're in the economic monetary decline. But behind both of these sides of the triangle, the left and the right side, is the base of the triangle. We are in a spiritual moral decline. We've forgotten God. When Alexander Solzhenitsyn left the Soviet Union probably 30, 35 years ago, he was asked on BBC television, why did the Russian people lose their freedom? And he said without hesitation, because they forgot God. He came and was exiled in the United States I believe in Vermont, for about 25 years. When he returned to Russia in the 1990s, he was on Russian television, and they said, how would you characterize or portray America today? And without hesitation, he said, as a nation that has forgotten God. And indeed, we are a nation who have forgotten God. We worship another God with the small g, money, prosperity, affluence, materialism, et cetera, et cetera. And God says, you will have no other gods before me, and he is now crushing that God. And whether you know it or not, most Americans have lost about 50% of their wealth in the last 10 years or so. So our God of money, materialism, and so forth that we have put before the God of the Bible is now crumbling before our eyes. And I believe that God's judgment against this country, a country that now kills millions of babies, that has now embraced homosexuality with homosexual marriage and you name it, and so many other things that God hates and spells out in the Bible, I believe that God of the Bible is now moving to judge the United States of America. The message I have today is for the remnant. It's not for the majority of Americans or even the great majority of American Christians who could not and would not understand or believe what some of the things we're going to talk about today. So, America in decline, the moral spiritual decline as we've turned away from the Bible and Jesus Christ and turned to a secular humanist model that says we can do it all, and obviously that's crumbling before our eyes. I believe that's behind the social political decline and the plunge into socialism and a loss of our freedom and the monetary economic decline. So this is, I believe, where America is today. Now, I'd like to try to illustrate a few principles as we move along this morning. This is about an hour-and-a-half lecture I'm going to give you in 45 minutes. I gave it in New York City and in Mexico City just a couple of weeks ago. I only have 45 minutes, so you'll have to forgive me. I'm going to talk faster and faster as I go along. The reason we're handing out those newsletters is a lot of the notes and things that I will talk about you will find in the newsletter. So if you'll take those newsletters and go home and read them, not before bedtime, but if you'll read them, I think it'll fill in the blanks because I'm going to move pretty fast. The first principle is the majority is always wrong. And you saw the majority just elect the most socialist government in U.S. history, but that's been true throughout history. The majority have always taken the easy way. They've been looking the wrong way and so forth, and that is history in life. Americans are perpetual optimists. We love good news. We don't like bad news. We don't like people who bring bad news, and that's why most Americans would never sit in this auditorium and listen to what Chuck and myself and Alan and other speakers will talk to you about today. Third principle is to win the battle for investment survival, we need to avoid being a pessimist, being an optimist or a pessimist, but be a realist. And I'm going to give you a bit of a dose of realism this morning that may make some of you turn a little green. The next principle is complacency is self-satisfaction accompanied by unawareness of actual dangers or deficiencies. And I think you probably know there's massive complacency in America today, including and maybe even especially among Christians and Christian pastors, as Chuck so eloquently described earlier. Next principle, always mistrust the obvious. What you see happening, what you're told is happening, is not what's happening. And so you have to look behind the scenes to know what is really happening. And there are very different people pulling the strings. And I would argue that even President Obama, who I'm no great fan of, is not pulling the strings, that there's much more powerful people than him that are pushing for a global government. Wherever you look at what you think you see, and then you need to see what's going on behind the scenes. Always mistrust the obvious. Very few events are spontaneous or accidental. Most are manipulated. Most political events, most financial events are manipulated in order to accomplish the goals of the political left and the people who are moving the whole world and the United States in a given direction. And as I talk about the financial markets here this morning, you need to know the financial markets are totally manipulated. They are not free markets. They are manipulated by Wall Street, who is in collusion with the Fed, the U.S. Treasury, et cetera. Next principle, global events are speeding up. I call it the acceleration factor, and I've never seen things move as quickly, as rapidly as they are today, not only in America, but all over the world. And I've never seen things deteriorate as rapidly as they are. Some people would say it's because we're plunging towards the kingdom of the Antichrist, the return of the Lord, and into the end times, and maybe they're right, but whatever it is, things are moving very, very rapidly, and I have great concern for this country, and I have great concern even between now and the election. that there will be some kind of a major crisis before the election that will turn things back around in favor of the president, who is losing favor across the country right now. We'll touch on some of these things as we move along. There's a battle for world domination, and it is a financial and a political battle, but most importantly, it is a spiritual battle. It is a gigantic spiritual war between the forces of God and the forces of Satan. And right now it looks like Satan's forces are winning, but we all know the last chapter, and Satan will lose, but it's going to get ugly before then. A lot of people are going to suffer, and there's going to be a lot of persecution of Christians right here in America. As Chuck said, it's happening all over the world, but it's going to happen right here in America, and yes, there will be martyrdom of Christians in America like we see in Africa and Asia and so forth. Next point. Politicians and monetary and economic authorities will lie without hesitation to protect their own interests. I think that's so obvious I won't even take any more time on it. Of course they lie. Virtually everything that comes out of Washington and most politicians, all economic information is totally distorted and totally dishonest. So obviously ignore what the politicians do, but watch closely what they do. What they say, but watch what they do. The next few years will witness a tremendous loss of freedom in the United States. And indeed, we could lose all of our freedom. I think that we may end up looking a lot more like Nazi Germany. And in fact, if you want a pattern for what is happening, even a pattern for the coming persecution of Christians and traditionalists, go back and study what was happening in Nazi Germany during the war. And during the 1930s. During Nazi Germany, we saw this tremendous loss of freedom. We saw them marginalizing and pushing the Jews to the edges of society and outlawing so much of what they could say and do and so forth. And you see that same pattern now, only it's the Christians that are being targeted, not the Jews in our country. Throughout history, the bearer of bad news has been unpopular. In the ancient world, such people were sometimes stoned, and I believe that that's certainly going to be true in our country today. The kind of message that Alan Keyes will bring, or Chuck Baldwin or myself or others, not a very popular message today. Discredit the factual arguments or the truth. The political left will discredit a man. They will label him. This is called argumentum ad hominem, argument against the man, and they will try to discredit them. You've seen them do this to Ron Paul. Anyone who stands up for righteousness and truth is going to be attacked in this country. Hosea 4:6 says, "My people perish from lack of knowledge." There's a lot of information out there on the internet and so forth, but not a lot of knowledge and understanding. And Proverbs 27:12 says, "The prudent see danger and take refuge, but the simple keep going and suffer for it." And I think the simple is the great majority of Americans today, including the great majority of Christians. Okay, let's talk about some realities that I think we're all going to be facing. We're not in an economic recovery. The economy and the financial markets are rolling over again into a recession or depression. In fact, we never did come out of that. Free markets, the next point is free markets no longer exist in America. All financial markets are rigged and manipulated by Wall Street, Washington, and the Fed. I've worked in the financial industry since 1968 for about 42 or 43 years, and I can tell you I've never seen a time when the financial markets are more rigged and manipulated than they are today. The government, Wall Street, and the Fed are in collusion to advance their own interest, agenda, and profits. Next point is the American middle class is being systematically destroyed by the Depression, by their unsustainable debt burden, by massive unemployment, and exploding government regulations, controls, and taxes. America is rapidly losing its freedom, its constitution, and is becoming a socialist state reminiscent of Europe or the former Soviet Union. So welcome to a socialist America. And of course, it's accelerated massively since the election of 2008, which in my opinion was more than an election. It was a coup d'etat by the political left in America. The West is collapsing while Asia is prospering. I travel to Asia a lot. My wife and I work with orphans' homes, with a half a dozen orphans' homes out in Asia. And I spend about 6 months a year out in Asia, leaving again in a couple of weeks. And Asia is the wave of the future. The world balance of power is shifting to Asia right now. The 19th century belonged to England. England dominated the world in the 19th century. In the 20th century, America dominated the world. In the 21st century, it will be Asia. So the world financial, economic balance of power, I believe ultimately military balance of power, is shifting to Asia. It's interesting that even the world's gold is moving towards Asia. The sovereign debt crisis in Europe is spreading and threatens the entire global financial system. We've just seen the beginning of that crisis, and America's looming debt crisis is even greater than Europe's. Wealthy investors and the man on the street in Asia and the Middle East and Europe who understand the coming financial convulsions are moving rapidly into gold as a safe haven currency of last resort. Okay, the economic recovery that was not a recovery is rolling over. Okay, John Williams said in his Shadow Government Statistics, he said the U.S. economy remains in economic depression, which is about to intensify anew. Another good friend of mine, Bill King, says the stock market has little to do with investment. It is not a facility for capital formation. It is a rigged mixture of collusion, manipulation, insider dealing, and intervention. This is the new economy because the old economy and its structure no longer exists, and he is very, very accurate on that. Virtually every news commentator, economist, financial analyst, Wall Street shill, the Fed, and the Obama administration has been telling us nonstop for the last 12 months or so that we are in an economic recovery. They cite the rising stock market and a bounce in a few economic indicators as their evidence for this recovery. Hitler and his propaganda minister, Joseph Goebbels, were fond of saying, tell a lie, tell it often enough, and the people will believe it. So we've heard the recovery now hype thousands of times, and many Americans have begun to believe it because they wanted to believe it. However, 26 million Americans are unemployed, 40 million Americans are on food stamps, millions of Americans are in the process of losing their homes, 1.8 million Americans will go bankrupt this year, and hundreds of thousands of struggling small business owners are not buying into the recovery propaganda. There's 5 stages in the collapse of confidence in the economy and the financial markets. We go from euphoria to despair. Euphoria is when everything is terrific and getting better and better, and there's a great disbelief that nothing can go wrong, and that's what most people have been believing in recent years. Then you move to concern as net worths begin to decline, and then fear begins to set in as collective confidence begins to plummet. People don't want to open their investment or mutual fund statement and see how badly their portfolio has fared. And then you go to panic, the next stage. People begin to stampede for the exit, get me out at any price, and finally despair when people just give up. We're now entering the fear stage in the economy, the stock market, and the real estate markets, and we think that over the next 6 to 12 to 18 months, the panic phase could step in when people begin to really realize that the recovery is not real, probably never was real, that the economy and financial system are going down hard, and that the stock and real estate prices have a lot further to fall. The bond market will also go through these stages as long interest rates are forced up and prices collapse. And one of the reasons that we've written about these things for so long and that we're talking about this morning is that so many Americans are going broke and losing everything they've worked all their lives for, and that includes American Christians who have been listening to the wrong people and violating even the biblical principles in Scripture that could have kept them from going broke. So Christians need to understand these things, but Christians don't understand these things, unfortunately, any better than the rest of the people. Okay, the credit crunch continues. Credit in the U.S. available for businesses and consumers continues to contract at record rates as we continue to see the M3 money supply contract throughout the winter and spring at an annualized rate of 7. Now it's actually close to 8%. This next chart shows, and you look at the right side of that chart, and it shows what's happening to money supply. The M3 money supply is dropping like a rock. A broader measure of money supply, MZM money supply, is down 10.7% in March, and during the same 3 months, the assets of institutional money market funds fell at a 37% rate, the sharpest decline ever. This drop in M3 money supply matched the M3 money supply decline seen in 1929 to 33, is the largest decline since the 1930s, in spite of near zero interest rates and the biggest financial blitz in history. Frightened banks are virtually refusing to lend to consumers and businesses unless they don't need the money. Bank lending rates in the U.S. are now the lowest they've been since 1942. This contraction in broad money supply is signaling looming deterioration in U.S. business conditions and intensified economic downturn into what is popularly called a double-digit recession. By March, commercial and industrial loans were down year-on-year 19.7%. Commercial paper outstanding, that's short-term business loans, were down 26.7% year-on-year. The real inflation-adjusted decline in M3 in consumer, industrial, and commercial loans and commercial paper outstanding are very large signals for an intensified economic downturn in the near future. A down economy in 2010 will blow apart current projections for the federal deficit and Treasury funding needs, as well as confidence in the banking system and solvency. By late summer or early fall, we could be experiencing a sharply declining stock market and renewed decline in business activity, which will be feeding on each other. Now, one of the big problems in the economy is unemployment, and they've told us over and over we had a jobless recovery. Well, as with everything else they have told us, it was a lie. America's economy is over 70% based on consumer spending, but record numbers of Americans, the highest since the Great Depression, are out of work, working only part-time, losing their homes, unable to get loans, going bankrupt, and are on food stamps. The Washington, Wall Street, Fed touted so-called jobless recovery is another one of their nonstop blatant lies, distortions, deceptions, and manipulations of the public to get them spending and borrowing again and to vote for them again in the upcoming elections. Okay? Unemployment continues to climb. 26 million Americans are out of work. 21.7% of the workforce and 20.3%, according to the Gallup poll, of those working and counted by the Bureau of Labor Statistics are underemployed, many working only part-time, temporary, and seasonal jobs at minimal low-paying wages when they want to work full-time. The U.S. official unemployment rate, U3, stands at 9.7. They said more recently, I think, 9.5. But even the BLS's own U6 numbers, which include discouraged workers, show about 16.6, and real-world unemployment in the United States is close to 22%. I repeat, is close to 22%, and that just is figured by going back to look at how we calculated all the people who were out of work about 20 years ago before they found 101 ways to lie about the numbers. So these charts basically show that on the bottom, the U3 unemployment, the middle one, the U6, and the real world unemployment, close to 22%. We haven't seen these kind of unemployment numbers since the peak of the Great Depression. Unemployment in some American cities is a staggering 25 to 40%. The mayor of Detroit says unemployment in Detroit is over 50%. That's the mayor saying that. Over 6 million Americans are actively seeking work but can't find jobs. This is double the rate from a year earlier and the highest level since the BLS started tracking such numbers in 1948. Excluding the post-war industrial shutdown when we closed down all war production factories, the current unemployment decline is the worst we have seen, or employment decline is the worst we've seen since the Great Depression. Now, the government is telling nonstop lies about unemployment. If any of you read my newsletter regularly over the years, we've written a lot of articles about the 101 ways they have to lie about and distort unemployment, and it's just so ridiculous, it's unbelievable. Virtually anything you read that comes out of the government about inflation, unemployment, or GDP, which is productivity or growth in the economy, are just lies. They're massive, massive distortions. And they get away with it because Wall Street goes along with it and promotes those numbers, and the public want to believe them. So it's amazing what happens to people when they want to believe something, even when it's not true, and way down deep they may know it, but they want to believe it because it makes them feel good. We've written about the BLS jobs manipulation techniques such as seasonal adjustments, counting millions of unemployed as self-employed, not counting millions of discouraged workers as unemployed, counting part-time temporary workers as full-time, and creating hundreds of thousands of phantom jobs each year out of thin air. In April, the BLS claimed 550,000 new jobs, which for the most part were created out of thin air. They just didn't exist. The BLS's bogus birth debt model is creating 230,000 phantom jobs, non-existent jobs per month, or 2.76 million jobs per year. They just make them up out of thin air, and they feed these to the public, and the public believes them. The BLS considered someone who has done 1 hour of work on the day it samples as employed, so a person can work 1 hour a month or a year and be counted as fully employed. Thousands of small businesses are going under, but the BLS does not count those job declines unless they've been officially notified that the company has gone under. They keep reporting those unemployed workers as if they were still employed. Then they assume thousands of new startup companies each month, which is not happening in this recession, and add tens of thousands of new phantom jobs. By netting the two, they're creating about 33,000 new jobs per month, or about 400,000 fake jobs per year. The reality is small businesses are probably cutting close to 400,000 jobs per year. Now, here's just a classic example of how they lied to us, the census hiring. The government claims to be hiring 600,000 workers for the census. But why is that when most people mailed back in their census forms? They didn't need but a handful of people to go out and collect from the people who forgot to mail them back in. 600,000, they say. Most of these workers, whatever the true total is, will be part-time, working only a few hours a week. But they'll be counted as full-time employees and used to overstate unemployment or understate unemployment until about September. In late May, two census workers kind of blew the whistle on the Obama census worker scam. Naomi Cohn told the New York Post, Naomi Cohn told the New York Post that she was hired and fired a number of times by Census. Each time she was hired back, Census was able to report the creation of a new job to the Labor Department. Another census worker from Manhattan told the Post that he was on his fourth rehire with the 2010 census. Here's what he said. He said, "I've been hired, trained for a week, given a few hours of work, then laid off, so my unemployed self now counts for 4 new jobs. I have been paid more to train all 4 times than I have paid to actually produce results. These are yours and my tax dollars at work," and this is how Obama created 600,000 new jobs out of thin air, which never were created. U.S. companies are permanently cutting millions of jobs and or outsourcing them abroad. Over the past decade or so, over 10 million jobs have been permanently left the U.S. in manufacturing and service industries. Bank of America has outsourced 20,000 jobs in Mumbai and New Delhi, India, to service the huge mortgage business, which they acquired when Countrywide Mortgage went under a couple of years ago. Bank of America pays these workers 90% less than the U.S. wages, and the Indian workers are very happy to have the work at 10% of U.S. wages. Those jobs will never return to America. In Manila, in the Philippines, where I go all the time, one of our orphans' homes is near Manila, call centers employ 1 million Filipinos for companies such as United Airlines, large U.S. insurance companies, banks, stock brokerage, etc. That is 1 million former U.S. jobs that will never return to America. Your friendly Delta Airlines reservation agent is in Pune, India. State of California, the U.S. Defense Department, and dozens of other states and federal agencies outsource hundreds of thousands of jobs abroad in order to save money. In April, IBM told Personnel Today that the firm's total workforce of almost 400,000, they will cut it by 2017 to 100,000. That's a 75% cut in the global workforce of IBM, and that's a permanent type cut. U.S. manufacturers are moving whole factories and development centers to China, India, or elsewhere in Asia. Applied Materials is planning to replace their U.S. research center for a new one in China. This may be good for IBM, the U.S. multinationals in China, but it is terrible for U.S. jobs, income, and standard of living, and the long-term economic strength of the United States. Tens of millions of manufacturing and service jobs are permanently leaving this country and will never return to America. This cannot be good. According to the National Federation of Independent Business, small businesses in America have steadily cut more jobs than at any time in the NFIB's 35-year history. Small businesses owners have told NFIB that they intend to continue to cut their payrolls. It should be remembered that small businesses employ even more workers than the multinationals do. We're witnessing an incredible U.S. debt and deficit explosion. Let's see what happened here. In April, the U.S. posted an almost $82.7 billion budget deficit, 4 times the 20.9 budget deficit in April of 2009, and the largest ever for the month of April, a tax month when most of the U.S. tax revenue are supposed to come in. As of June 1st, the U.S. national debt is above $13 trillion, up $1.85 trillion over the past 12 months, and that's the real budget deficit. The Obama administration and accounting gimmicks used accounting gimmicks to understate the 2009 budget deficit by almost $400 billion. I guess if you're going to tell a lie, tell it really big. I think Hitler said that once, and the people will believe it. And they'll do the same thing in 2010. In February, the U.S. ran the biggest one-month deficit in its history, $221 billion. It took America 169 years to amass that large of a deficit, and Obama did it in just 28 days. You just got to think about that for a minute. By year-end 2010, the national debt will probably reach $14 trillion. If the economy turns back into recession, the 2010 budget deficit is likely to exceed $2 trillion. In the past 2 years, America's gross debt has grown by 38%, or about $3.57 trillion. America's national debt condition is as bad as the worst in Europe, percentage-wise, only much, much larger in total dollars. The smartest financial minds in the world know that it's only a matter of time until there's a European-style run on the U.S. dollar. A few other indicators for a renewed recession. Consumer confidence is falling. A recent ABC poll said that 92% of the respondents say that the state of the economy is bad or poor. Other polls indicate that on average, 80% bearishness on the part of the public. 72% of the public think that Congress is made up of economic idiots who are ruining the economy in the country. I don't know why that's 99%. Incredible. Consumer, I guess that's why we have a Tea Party movement. I hope this Tea Party movement grows like a weed. Consumers represent 70% of U.S. economy. When they're negative or frightened, they stop buying and borrowing, and the economy goes down. Income tax payments and employment tax payments are down. As of May 2010, IRS data shows that withheld taxes and unemployment taxes were down 3.6% year on year. So our socialist government, what are they going to do next? They're going to raise taxes, which will further crater the U.S. economy. Taxes are fixing to go up for everybody, not just the so-called rich, but for everybody, so we can pay for Obamacare and a lot of other wonderful new programs. Personal bankruptcies are exploding. Bankruptcies for March and April were running at a 1.82 million annualized rate. That's hardly the sign of an economic recovery or the end of the recession. 40 million Americans are on food stamps, the highest in U.S. history. Will those broke welfare recipients help to fuel the recovery? I would think not. Corporate earnings are distorted. 80% of the so-called profits recovery is due to the financials, the big banks and brokerages who were recipients of the lion's share of the government's bailout funds. Is that right? What happened is they created these trillions of dollars, and it all went to the friends of Wall Street, to Wall Street, to the big banks, the big corporations on Wall Street. And you need to understand this. Wall Street and the government, the Congress, the Fed, they're all like Siamese triplets. They're all joined at the hip. They're all one and the same. You could tell this when we saw that Wall Street supported Obama 7-1 over McCain in the last election. Clearly, Obama was the designated winner, and McCain was the designated loser, which is another story. Earnings are flat are down in the 90% of the remaining U.S. economy. And most corporate earnings are massaged to lift their stock prices. They keep two sets of books. For the public, earnings income is high, and for the IRS, earnings income is low. Automaker pension funds are now underfunded by $17 billion. The California public pension funds are underfunded by over $500 billion, and California is on the verge of bankruptcy. U.S. consumers are tapped out. Without credit cards and government welfare, consumer spending would be plunging. Walmart says its U.S. customers are living on food stamps and government benefits, with more customers than ever living from paycheck to paycheck. 26 million unemployed workers are exhausting their savings. Millions have lost their homes, and 40 million Americans on food stamps, with 1.8 million personal bankruptcies forecast this year. Will these people borrow and spend us into a new economic recovery? What do you think? I don't think so. Global commodity prices are collapsing. The Journal of Commerce says commodity prices fell 57% in May. A picture is worth 1,000 words, they say. Copper is very indicative of where global economic is going, and you can see the copper market is rolling over. Likewise, you can look at borrowing by consumers, and you can look at that by looking at a chart of MasterCard or Visa, and you can see the direction that that's heading in. Or you can look at retail sales and where that's headed. There is no recovery. The recovery was a lie. They gave us that information in order to get people to buy and borrow and vote for them, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, where are we headed? I got to speed up now. Sorry, I've gone slow so far, so we'll kind of ratchet this thing up a little bit. First, we're going into deflation, and then super or hyperinflation. The great debt implosion in Europe, the UK and America, the greatest contraction of M3 in money supply or liquidity squeeze in the US since 29 to 33, the greatest unemployment since the Great Depression, the greatest implosion in real estate since the 1930s, the greatest breakdown in U.S. and global stock markets, the greatest number of personal bankruptcies since the Great Depression, and the greatest credit crunch since the 1930s, all point toward a massive deflationary depression here in the United States and Europe and the UK. Okay? When is that coming? I think people will begin to get the picture probably as early as this fall, or perhaps this winter. Indeed, without falsified government stats on the economy, GDP, unemployment, CPI, et cetera, the downturn would already be obvious to everyone. The multi-trillion-dollar stimulus package only slowed down or gave a brief pause or bounce, called recovery, by the powers that be in the economic decline. But the U.S. government's sovereign debt, soon to be $14 trillion, is our Achilles heel, just as huge debts in Europe are threatening a cascading system of collapse, replete with sovereign defaults in Europe. And you want to look at Spain, Portugal, Italy, Hungary, any of those countries are probably going to be next. However, America's finances and balance sheets, the federal governments, the feds, and state and local governments are actually worse than the UK's, and Europe's many times larger. The next major crisis, I just wrote about this in my August newsletter, is going to be in the municipal bond market, $2.8 trillion market. You've already had 35 defaults so far this year, and municipal bonds are just going to go cascading in the next 3 to 6 to 9 months. When the reality dawns on foreign holders of trillions of dollars and they begin to stampede out of the dollar as they have the euro in recent months, the government and Fed will have to print trillions of dollars to buy back the tidal wave of dollars that will hit our shores. And at that point, in a matter of only a few weeks, the dollar could super or hyperinflate. Hyperinflation in the U.S. dollar is very possible within 5 years or less. Hyperinflation is always followed by a dictatorship. Think Weimar Germany, 1919 to 1923, and the Nazis coming to power a few years later. Under this scenario, gold could soar to $5,000 to $10,000 an ounce, probably higher. In America, Europe, and the UK, all of these countries will plunge into an inflationary depression a la the Weimar Germany, 1919 to 23. In the last few days of May, the public in Greece were stampeding into gold, paying $1,700 an ounce in a country where physical gold supplies were very low. From late April to May, $1.46 trillion was, in market value was lost in the U.S. stock market. One of the most important considerations in the current crisis, as I said earlier in one of our principles, is the speed with which it is spreading. Everything, the deterioration politically, financially, worldwide is accelerating dramatically. It's not just going at a normal pace or a gradual pace, it is exploding. And we have to figure out what that means. As alluded to earlier, when panic sets in, as it is now doing in Europe, the stampede for the exits hits with lightning speed. One apparent contradiction is that's hard to wrap our minds around is that while credit and with it the economy and most financial assets are contracting, consumer prices are still rising. Consider fuel, medical, education, fuel prices, food prices, and one could guess that price inflation on these kinds of things is close to 10%. John Williams' Shadow Government Statistics says it's around 9.5%. Actually, energy and food prices were up 18.7% from March 2009 to March 2010. We're up almost 4 percentage points in March of this year. Food prices alone rose over 6% in the first quarter of this year. The necessities of life in the United States are now inflating faster than any time in the last 26 years. So we're actually in an inflationary recession with the economy, unemployment, credit bubble, real estate, and stocks and bonds contracting or deflating, but the government running the printing presses faster and faster, which is going to push prices up. Deflationary depressions. This is important, and I speak at monetary and financial conferences all over the world, and it takes people a while to wrap their mind around this concept. But deflationary depressions can quickly morph into inflationary depressions and then hyperinflations as panicky politicians, monetary authorities run the printing presses at Mach 10 or 20 speed. Okay, now what will be our government's socialist solution to crises that they and Wall Street helped create? And I wonder sometimes if they helped create these crises intentionally. Remember, Rahm Emanuel said that these crises are great. They can have all kinds of new socialist controls and programs coming out of these crises. So they like crises, and maybe they even like to create them. With a public that's growing more angry by the day and an election only a few months away, and growing disenchantment with Obama and the Democrats, what can or will they do to make things look healthy in the economy and the financial system? Well, first, they'll continue to accelerate their strong recovery propaganda and lie even more with the economic statistics. Next, they'll use Operation Scapegoat and blame the present downturn on Europe and their incredible financial irresponsibility and sovereign debt crisis, but basically a lot of their debt crisis started in America and moved over there. They'll print more money. Obama recently asked for a couple $100 billion more, but they will ultimately, they call it now quantitative easing, they'll throw trillions of dollars more at the problem over the next 6 to 12 months. Next, they'll raise taxes on hardworking individuals and producers who are making over $250,000 a year, but it's not just them. They'll raise capital gains taxes, which affects everyone. They'll raise taxes on all businesses, large and small. They're going to raise taxes on gasoline, raise taxes on medical and insurance industries, and a value-added tax. They are pushing that very hard. They have, on average, 20% value-added tax, which is in Europe now. In the different countries, it averages 20%, and they add that tax at every single level of production, from the field all the way to the retail store, and that would bring them in trillions of dollars from taxes. They will increase controls on businesses and individuals. The recession is an opportunity, as Rahm Emanuel has boasted, to put socialist controls and regulations on virtually every industry and every business, large and small, on individuals. The government has taken over 96% of the mortgage industry in the United States is now controlled by the government. They took over General Motors. I mean, we're not moving into socialism. We are plunging into socialism. As I said, 2008 was a coup d'etat. It was not an election, it was a coup d'etat, and the political left took over this country. Next, they'll move to exchange controls and foreign exchange controls to prevent U.S. businesses and individuals from protecting themselves by getting funds out of the U.S. I think that could happen within months. We already have de facto exchange controls, which are being rapidly expanded. The next bailout will be $165 billion for the labor unions to rescue the insolvent union pension funds, and of course to buy many, many more votes. Next, there will be censorship of hard money conservative publications, radio, TV programs that are spreading fear, as they say. This talk this morning would be spreading fear, and so under a censorship regime, you would not be able to speak like this. These are people who are telling the truth about the true condition of the economy, of the expanding government controls and regulations. Glenn Beck certainly would be one of their #1 targets. Also, they're targeting gold coin dealers, hard money newsletters, et cetera, et cetera. I believe that we're within months of major censorship in the United States, and if some major bombs or terrorist attacks go off between now and the November elections, which I think is a growing possibility if President Obama is looking bad and the Democrats in the polls, and we should have a series of terrorist attacks. Let's say they come in and somebody comes in and blows up 25 shopping centers on a given Saturday afternoon. Not only would we have police state controls on the whole economy, but we would also have censorship of, I believe, probably of the internet, of television, of newsletters like my own, et cetera, et cetera. Now they're also talking about nationalization of U.S. pension funds by forcing them to invest some or all of their portfolios in U.S. Treasury paper, converting them to government-controlled annuities, et cetera, et cetera. All of these socialist solutions will make the U.S. economy worse and the Depression much longer, a la FDR and the New Deal socialism of the 1930s, as they slowly strangle our free market system to death. only I correct that term. They're not slowly strangling it to death. They're doing it pretty darn fast now. Okay, I got a few more minutes, so let's speed up again. Let's talk about the global gold market. Most people don't understand how gold interfaces with all of these things. The American people have been dumbed down to almost total ignorance on the role that gold plays in the world financial and monetary system. John Emery, who's a money manager, said recently, he said, if there's one thing that has been true in history, gold has always migrated to the area where the true wealth is being created. And I mean, it is no secret today that Europe and North America's days as leading economic powers are on the wane. Remember I said when the balance of power is shifting from the West, it's shifting over to Asia now. The money is being created, he said, and the wealth is building up in the East. And not surprisingly, that is where the gold is going. India is a major market, and China could become the biggest market in fairly short order. So gold is in a long-term bull market, which continues to accelerate in mid-2010, even as the Washington, the Wall Street, the Fed, and their wholly owned liberal media continue to denigrate, ridicule, and scorn the precious metals and its buyers. With gold up almost fivefold from $250 to about $1250, it's a little lower than that now, over the last 10 years, and the stock market down 30%, the media and Wall Street continue to tell people they should have all their money in the stock market, and none of their money in gold. Gold is only for idiots. Gold are for people in the remnant who understand the times and what is going on. So effective has the anti-gold propaganda been that less than 2% of the American people have bought into gold, while 98% have remained in stocks, except those who are just in real estate. This is with the stock market down 30% in 10 years and gold up almost 500%. I mean, what's the definition of terminally stupid? But if Americans just don't get it regarding gold, the rest of the world does. There's a stampede into gold in Asia, Europe, and the Middle East as the European financial sovereign world debt crisis proliferates, as people worldwide lose confidence in all fiat currencies, and as Western governments become more socialist, controlling, and print money by the trillions to try to avert a full-blown depression. China is accumulating a massive amount of gold right now and intends to have the world's reserve currency in probably the next 5 or 10 years. China is emerging as the powerhouse of the world, okay? Wall Street, the Fed, and government have been manipulating the gold market for the past 40 years, primarily through paper gold or gold futures. These activities are continuing today, but their efforts are being overwhelmed as they were in the 1970s by massive global free market forces. Western central banks and governments hate gold. It's a competitor for all of their printing press money, but the central banks of Asia are buying up all the gold that they can get their hands on. We believe that gold will move to at least $5,000 to $6,000 an ounce within the next 3 to 5 years or higher as the world economic sovereign debt crisis implodes and Western currency values are destroyed. So gold prices are going up on a worldwide basis, and I'm lost here. Gold has recently risen to new highs in terms of every currency in the world, including the US dollar, which has been rallying because of the European sovereign debt crisis. Germans, Chinese, and Indians are leading the buying surge and are by no means alone. Wealthy investors all over the world who see and understand the spreading global financial crisis are buying up the limited and dwindling supply of physical gold by the billions of dollars each week. Gold began to rise in August 15th of 1971 when Richard Nixon broke the last tie that gold had to the US dollar. We reneged on our promises that foreigners could convert their dollar holdings into gold, and so we became 100% fiat currency in 1971. Over the next 9 years, gold went up 25-fold to $875. And it then entered a long-term period of decline with Wall Street and the financial giants, including the Fed, hammering gold down and manipulating it for a lot of that time. Gold bottomed in 1999 at $253 and then did a double bottom again in 2001 at $255. Since then, it's gone up to over $1250 and it's built a real good base in this area. We think the gold prices are still pretty cheap. Compared to their inflation-adjusted highs, gold would have to go back and when it was $875. If you adjusted that for inflation, gold would have to go to at least $2,300 or $2,400 today. If you use real world inflation numbers, gold would probably have to go to around $7,500. Again, with silver, if silver were adjusted for inflation going back to 1980, where it hit a high of 52, it would have to go to about 139 now. If you use real world numbers, a whole lot higher. So the prices of gold and silver are still very, very cheap at present, we believe. We believe that gold and silver are one of the areas in which people can protect their wealth and protect their assets. I got into the gold business 39 years ago in order to try to protect people from a financial situation, which is what we see now. We've had hints of it, and we've had little rushes and surges of it, but just for such a time as this is why we got into the gold business a long time ago and tried to start warning people of the financial crisis that was coming. Okay, I'm going to close this out in about 2 minutes, so I will speed up one more time. Why would an individual buyer own gold now? Very simple, because they do not trust their government, their central bank, financial leaders, financial system, or currency. That's it. Gold is now detached from the dollar and is rising in terms of virtually all currencies in the world. Gold is a safe haven against war, and consider the potential for war in the Middle East. I wish I had a couple hours to talk about the potential for war in the Middle East. It is huge and growing, and it's not just about Israel and Iran. It's a lot bigger than that. You could also have a war over in Korea and so forth. Gold responds well to those kinds of things. Gold represents real wealth to most people in the world except brain-dead Americans and British, who just don't get it. And gold is highly portable, hideable, trackable, liquid form of wealth. And one of the reasons I've encouraged people to buy gold for years is because if Big Brother or a socialist government or a communist government takes over in the United States, one place that you can hide wealth is in gold, and that's been true. That's how people bought their way to freedom out of Nazi Germany in the 1930s. That's how the Vietnamese bought their way to freedom and out of communist-controlled Vietnam in the 1970s. That's been happening for 5,000 years. So gold is protection against a lot of instability in the world, and it certainly has been the most profitable investment in the world for the last decade. As I said, the Dow was down 12% in the last decade, S&P 500 was down 31%, the NASDAQ was down 57%, and gold was up 500%. Okay? So where should people have had their retirement assets and so forth over the last decade? Okay, I'm going to speed up now, and I'm sorry, I'm just about out of time. A few general principles of financial survival. First, strive for financial maximum liquidity. You want to be as liquid as you can in a financial crisis. And folks, we are moving into the biggest financial crisis in the history of the United States. It's going to be bigger than the 1930s. And if you are not ready for it, you will be joining the ranks of all of those Christians who are going bankrupt because they were stupid and didn't understand the times. Please don't let that happen to you. Strive for maximum liquidity. Next, reduce your debt to the lowest level possible. The 1.82 million Americans who will go bankrupt this year are going to all go bankrupt because they had too much debt. Okay? That's going to include a lot of Christians. Keep it simple. Keep everything you do financially very simple. Get back to the basics. If you don't understand it, don't do it. Don't let anyone do your thinking for you. Now, we publish a monthly newsletter called the McAlvany Intelligence Advisor. Been publishing it for 35 years. We try to help people to understand the times, but we fully understand we cannot do people's thinking for them. They have got to think their way through and pray their way through what you do. If you're not praying about what you're doing financially with yourself and in a lot of other ways, you better darn well start praying. We're going into the biggest crisis, political and financial, in the history of the United States, and everybody's going to know it within the next 3 to 6 months. Even the people who are asleep now and think that everything I'm saying today is crazy, they will know it within 3 to 6 months. Seek to understand the times in which we live, and we try to do that with our newsletter. We have a weekly commentary on McAlvany.com that my son does, and he talks to leading financial people all over the world. You can tune in. It's free, 30 or 40 minutes, and I think you can begin to get some deeper understanding of what's going on. Be flexible. Don't plant your feet in cement. Plan ahead and develop a strategy. You need a strategy for survival for the next 10 years, which are going to be really hard. And you just need to look around you and see how many of your friends, relatives, business associates, etc., are hurting financially right now, and realize that that could go up 5 or 10-fold in the next couple of years. Okay? Develop a mindset of survival. No matter what the circumstances, never, never give up. That's what Churchill said when England was in its darkest hour and the Nazis were bombing the heck out of them and so forth. And he rallied the people with his great cry, never, never, never give up. And I would say that to you too. Obviously, seek God's wisdom on how to live in these times. Just a few specifics and we'll close this out. First of all, you get out of debt as much as possible. Zero debt is optimum, and you take on no new debt. Okay? Set up a strict budget. Cut the fat, frills, and extras out of your life and begin an aggressive savings program. If you're not doing that, do it now. Start it tomorrow. Reduce your real estate holdings to no more than 25% of your net worth. Real estate has not seen its lows. It is going to go lower, okay? Because so many people are hurting and so many people are going bankrupt and the economy is going lower. Real estate cannot accept it, and that's going to include commercial real estate as well as residential real estate. Get out of all U.S. stocks. The stock market is going down to 6,700, on its way to 3,500, and maybe down under 1,000. The stock market is in serious trouble. You have been in a bear market rally since 2007, and we think the stock market is forming another massive top. Watch out for the stock market. Maybe gold stocks would be an exception. Monitor your financial condition of your bank, S&L, or insurance company closely. If it's a C or lower, move to a stronger institution. One of the banks in my own hometown just went from a B, I think an A minus, to a D plus in a matter of about 3 to 6 months. Why? Because they had a whole bunch of bad real estate loans. That bank is now in serious trouble, and yet they looked really healthy only about 6 months ago. So you need to monitor your bank, S&L, or insurance company. Call us at that number, and we can give you a rating on your bank, etc. Develop a second source of income in case your primary source goes away. Okay? And for many people, their primary source is going away, may go away, et cetera, et cetera. I had a consultation with one of our clients yesterday, and he was telling me he works for a big company, but they're laying off people all around the company. And he says, I could be next, okay? You need a second source of income when that happens. Diversify up to 25% of your liquid assets outside the United States. Most of you will never do that. But we have a number of wealthy investors who are very, very worried about where they see our government headed and so forth, who have done that. I think you would be surprised as to how many. Let me see if I can find where I was now. How many people may be doing that today? I would position your portfolio or liquid assets as follows: 35% in gold and silver, semi-numismatic coins, et cetera, et cetera. 15% in gold stocks, 25% perhaps in short-term T-bills, although I really don't like them very well, 25% in foreign-denominated short-term government bonds, or even a Swiss annuity. Years ago, we started telling people, 20 years ago, hey, the stock market's not going to do very well. You ought to be getting into gold. And we've got over $1 billion now of our clients' money that has gone into IRAs, into gold in their IRAs, and many of them are up 3, 4, 5-fold, while most people who have their 401ks in their IRAs and stocks have lost at least 50% of what they've got. So we're great believers that you put gold and silver into IRAs as well. Okay, I'm running out of time. Risk management is essential in a time of financial turmoil. Don't take risk. You do not want to speculate. You do not want to take risk. I hate to be negative, but don't believe your stockbroker. They don't know what's going on. Wall Street does not go, they're in business to hustle you for stocks. And they hustle people for stocks all the way down the last 10 years and all the other garbage that Wall Street puts out. I worked on Wall Street for decades. It is the most gigantic red light district in the world. They will do anything for money. And the average American is so stupid, he just doesn't understand. And so be careful who is advising you and who you're taking your advice from. This is very important. Develop alternate sources of information. You're not going to get it from most of the news on television. Fox News is an exception, and I really appreciate a lot of the things that Glenn Beck and others are saying. So that is an exception. But basically, you need some alternate sources of information. There's only a handful of newsletters like mine left. 95% of them have gone away over the last 10 or 15 years. McAlvany.com, I already mentioned that. That's got that's on weekly, and you can get a lot of hardcore information from that. Likewise, my own newsletter will give you a 30% discount if you want to subscribe to my newsletter. It's not a moneymaker. It's been there for 35 years to try to help people better understand the times and prepare for just such a time as this. There's a few other good publications out there. As I said earlier, if you want to understand how the country has plunged as far as it has to the political left, go out and buy before you leave this. It's called The Agenda, and it's how the political left took over the United States. It's out on the table out there. It's about an hour and a half. And you know, even I didn't understand, and I've been studying this stuff and lecturing on it for years. I didn't understand all of this until I saw this film. So we need to have good sources of information. This film would be something that you should get and share with your friends. Proverbs 27:12 says, "The prudent see danger and take refuge, but the simple keep going and suffer for it." I think the prudent are the remnant, and they're very, very small in number. How many millions of people are in Denver? How many people are at this meeting today? I mean, basically, I'm looking at the remnant. I know the remnant is bigger than this, but the remnant is still very, very small. And the remnant do see the danger, and they take refuge. If you, by the way, if you ever want a free consultation or to talk to us about your financial situation, we do that. We try to help people do that. We will do it as long as we can until the government puts us out of business, which could be in the next couple of years. I don't think you have forever to buy gold and silver or do some of the things I talked about here today, because I think things are moving very, 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 very rapidly indeed. These are challenging times we live in. I think these will be the most challenging times in U.S. history. It's global, which sometimes makes me wonder if this is the rising kingdom of the Antichrist. All I can say is times are going to be very, very tough politically, economically, financially, socially, and in every other way. I believe they will even include persecution of the Christian church. I wrote a book about 10 years ago, 10 or 12 years ago during the Clinton years, called Storm Warning, the Coming Persecution of Christians and Traditionalists in America. Probably ought to rewrite the book sometime in the next year or two, and I believe that's coming too. I believe we will see great persecution in America. This is not a time to walk alone. We all need a deeper relationship with our Lord Jesus Christ than ever, any time in our history. I've given you a lot of bad news here this morning, but the good news is that you don't have to walk through this thing by yourself. God will walk through it with you. He's looking for a few good men and women who will take a stand in this time, who will be courageous. And you know, let me say something that's very, very negative. Some of us in this room are going to be martyred for the cause of Jesus Christ. Maybe in America, maybe you'll be traveling out to Asia like my wife and I do. I don't know what. But the persecution is coming, as Chuck alluded to this morning, the persecution is coming all over the world. It is coming all over the world, and it's coming right here in America. And this thing is moving on us like a freight train. And I don't have all the political answers. I've been involved in political action like Chuck, like Alan Keyes and so forth. We've been involved for 40 years. This thing is more than political. It is spiritual. It is spiritual. And if we love our country, the best thing we can do for our country is to be on our knees. Be on our knees and be praying for our country and be praying that God will intervene and God will show us His mercy, because we darn well deserve His judgment for all the babies we've killed and all the things we've done that have been an affront to Him. We deserve His judgment, but He's also a God of mercy. If enough Americans will turn back to God and will seek His face, as it says back in 2 Chronicles, and will ask for His forgiveness, He could still forgive our land. He could still turn this thing around. But it's not dependent on the great masses out there across Denver and across the land. It's truly dependent on you, the remnant. So how then shall we live in such a time as this, is the question that Francis Schaeffer asked. And when Mordecai approached Esther and he said, hey, they're about to kill all our people, you got to intervene. And she said, hey, I don't even know if I can. If I go in and see the king and he's in a bad mood, he'll kill me. And Mordecai said, well, who knows, but it's just for such a time as this that God has raised you up to take a stand for your people. And I would say the same thing to you today. Who knows, but it's just for such a time as this, when there is a dark black cloud that is coming across our country. But you know Jesus Christ, and you have the answer. And who knows, but that He has called you right now. I don't care if you're 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90. God can use you at any age to take a stand for Jesus and righteousness. The woman who helps run our orphans home over near Manila, she went to the mission field when she was 62. She's 86. Between 62, 63, and 86, she planted 70 churches. She started an orphans home. She started a Bible institute inside the National Prison. She started a halfway house. She's got a Christian school with 350 kids in it. She is the Mother Teresa of the Philippines. She did it between age 63 and age 86, and she's still going strong. You've got no excuse. I don't care how old you are. You can make a difference. Who knows? But it's just for such a time as this, that God has called you to take a stand for righteousness in our country, to take a stand against evil, and to take a stand for our Lord Jesus Christ. Thank you. I appreciate you being with me today, and God bless you. Thank you.